Hey everyone, Nomad here. Welcome back to Dead by Design, the series that's all about the creative side of Dead by Daylight. In the last episode, I said I was going to be reworking older and lesser used perks, and tonight we're going to be doing exactly that, thanks to all the people who are kind enough to give their suggestions as to what I should change. I've chosen 10 perks from your comments, 5 for Survivor and 5 for Killer, with each one receiving changes ranging from minor adjustments to full-on reworks. Since this is the first episode of Dead by Design to tackle already existing content, I'll be explaining why the current version of the perk is so bad or unpopular before showcasing my changes. And as always, if you like what you see, please consider subscribing to the channel. With all that out of the way, let's get right into the perk changes, starting with Better Than New. Better Than New is a perk that's unsurprisingly overlooked by most of the community. The idea of giving survivors a buff after healing them is solid, but the numbers and conditions really hold it back. A 16% increase equates to a second or two at most, with arguably 3 of the 4 bonuses being situational. When's the last time you ran Better Than New, healed a survivor, and then they went to open a chest? And even then, are they really noticing the 1 second that Better Than New saved them? I think this perk could become much better with a small rework to the way it functions. After healing a survivor, Better Than New now permanently affects them for the remainder of the trial. I also increased the numbers up to 20%, and it now increases rummaging speeds in addition to the other bonuses. After losing a health state or being downed, rather than completely losing the effect, it gets cut in half, and with all of that, Better Than New is now a much more useful and consistent perk. Let's move on to Hoarder, which I don't think I've ever seen someone use before. Hoarder doesn't see much use right now because it doesn't work with limited items, the effect itself is niche and underwhelming, and while the range of it is larger at 64 meters, there's always a chance that a survivor is just barely out of range. I went with a massive buff here while keeping the original effect intact, with the range limit being removed and now revealing a survivor's aura for a slightly longer duration. Hoarder now causes an additional chest to spawn, totaling 3, and all 3 of these chests plus the basement chest would spawn open without an item inside. Whenever you hook a survivor that's holding an item, that item gets pulled from their hands and is placed inside one of these open chests, where its aura is revealed to them and can only be opened by that survivor. Version 2, which is a lot more tame, sees the same changes as before, with the original effect remaining intact and being buffed, although to a higher amount than before. Now the effect also applies when an item runs out of charges or is consumed instantly, such as when a syringe or brand new part is used. Next up for Survivor, we have Desperate Measures. Desperate Measures isn't an awful perk in a vacuum, but there's a reason why you don't see anyone use it anymore. Back in the day, Botany Knowledge used to increase your healing speed by only 33%, and Desperate Measures was a more viable option since it was an upgrade over Botany Knowledge as soon as 2 survivors got injured. Fast forward to now, Botany Knowledge was buffed and offers a plus 50% healing speed at all times, but Desperate Measures never got any changes. In short, if you want a healing perk, Botany Knowledge is better and more consistent, and I don't think the bonus unhooking speed from Desperate Measures is enough to warrant using it. Again, it's not an awful perk in a vacuum, but when you have a game with over 200 plus perks to choose from, you have to be a little more consistent and efficient, and Botany Knowledge is usually just the way to go. To try and fix that, I would make it so Desperate Measures permanently gains a token whenever a survivor is killed or sacrificed. This gives the perk some more use in games where your teammates start to fall, rather than technically becoming weaker like it does now. I also bumped up the numbers by a noticeable amount so it can compete more with Botany Knowledge. And if you don't like the idea of increasing the numbers that much, here's another version where they're increased but not as much, and with a small bonus effect added. For Killer, let's take a look at Iron Grasp. Iron Grasp isn't bad as a quality of life perk, and it lets you carry survivors for 2 extra seconds before they wiggle free. However, Agitation is a complete upgrade since it allows you to carry survivors for further distances, you can do so faster, and when a survivor is struggling, you can use their movement to your advantage. So with all that in mind, rather than buffing the numbers of Iron Grasp, I added 2 new effects, 1 minor and 1 major. Now, while carrying a survivor, you can see their wiggle meter on your screen. This would effectively tell you what hooks you could or couldn't reach, and it would also let you know when to drop a survivor to prevent them from wiggling free. The major effect is that after carrying a survivor for at least 3 seconds, Iron Grasp would then surge in power, effectively preventing you from being pallet stunned. Rather than dropping the survivor, you're severely hindered for a short duration activation, but it might be just enough to let you reach a hook. I landed on this being okay because it's pretty niche. I didn't want to just make a perk that outright prevented pallet saves because I didn't think that would be very fun or healthy for the game. Adding a 3-second buffer keeps pallet saves in the game, and the hindrance effect means survivors are still technically rewarded for using one of their resources. It just isn't a guaranteed save anymore. Fast Track is our next perk, and with it, we're officially halfway through the video, so if you're enjoying it so far and want to see more, remember to leave a like or subscribe to the channel. Fast Track is a pretty intimidating perk to tackle, so I went with what is essentially just a less restrictive version of the one we have now. The obvious idea behind Fast Track is to stockpile tokens and use them to close out the repairs on a generator, but there are a few issues with this. Most glaringly, Fast Track discourages you from landing great skill checks. Every time you hit one, you consume all of your tokens, and this isn't always ideal. This makes Fast Track feel unsatisfying and restrictive, as it prevents you from using certain perks alongside it. I think the most elegant solution here would be to make Fast Track an activatable perk. So now, while repairing a generator, you can press the active ability button to trigger a difficult skill check, and succeeding that skill check would apply the effects of the perk. While I think that's already an amazing quality of life change, I don't think it would be overbearing if Fast Track received an extra token every time a survivor was hooked. All in all, pretty simple changes that I believe would make a huge difference. Speaking of intimidating perks, let's talk about Overwhelming Presence. This perk is clearly intended to counter or dissuade the survivors from using their items, at least in some scenarios. The problem is that Overwhelming Presence broadcasts itself to the survivors, and the range is directly linked to your terror radius, which means there's nothing to stop survivors from moving away before using their item, and the perk also becomes weaker the smaller your terror radius is. The obvious solution here is to make the effect map-wide, but that poses a new problem in that it's boring and unfun to face. To try and fix that, the effect of Overwhelming Presence is now map-wide, but only activates in 2 scenarios. At the beginning of the game, Overwhelming Presence activates for 30 seconds. This prevents early item usage from strong toolboxes, keys, and more. After deactivation, Overwhelming Presence will reactivate when a survivor is on the hook, with this effect lingering for 20 seconds after they get unhooked. This would slow down resets with medkits, generator progress with toolboxes, aggressive flashlight plays at loops, so on and so forth. Our second to last survivor perk is Rookie Spirit. Rookie Spirit is okay in solo queue, but unsurprisingly it's never used in swift groups, and the perk isn't that fun or engaging to use. That being said, I'm keeping the perk relatively simple, but adding some new effects and tweaking numbers. The skill check requirement is no longer there. I don't think activation requirements are a bad thing, but in this specific instance, it's unnecessary, and Rookie Spirit isn't really strong enough to warrant having one. The base effect is still there, but when a higher progress generator begins to regress, the aura is revealed to your entire team instead of just you. And finally, if you're the first survivor to begin repairing a generator, you receive a minor repair speed boost until you stop repairing the generator. These changes keep Rookie Spirit as an anti-regression tool, but gives the user some more direct bonuses and also spreads the effect to their team. Next up is Shattered Hope, which is one of the worst perks in the entire game. Being both terribly inconsistent and ineffective, Shattered Hope's main issue is that boons just aren't as prevalent nowadays. But even back in the Circle of Healing meta, you rarely saw killers run this perk because of how bad it is at actually stopping boons. There are 5 totems in every game, and good survivors will often put boons in faraway places. This means you have to traverse the map, find the totem, destroy it, and then go back to the area you want to be in, only for the survivors to bless another totem immediately afterwards. And remember, you're substituting a good perk like Deadlock or Brutal Strength for this one. To say Shattered Hope is useless would be an understatement. As a result, I've completely reworked it. Shattered Hope now lets you destroy any totem at will, whether it's a boon, dull, or hex totem. Now, before you stop the video and go down to the comments talking about how broken this would be with Pentimento, just let me explain, okay? Shattering a boon works the same way as it does now. You prevent the survivor from re-blessing the totem, and the totem can be rekindled by Pentimento. Only now, instead of revealing the auras of all survivors in the radius of the boon, you reveal the auras of all survivors across the map. Shattering a hex totem would cause it to shift locations, replacing a dull totem. Hex totems destroyed by Shattered Hope can't be rekindled, but the tokens of destroyed hex perks remain intact when moved. And finally, shattering a dull totem simply prevents the survivors from interacting with it, but dull totems destroyed in this manner can't be rekindled. This gives Shattered Hope new perk synergies while making it stronger and giving it a wider variety of applications. Our final survivor perk is self-preservation. Self-preservation is a perk that I really want to like, but unfortunately the limited range combined with the short duration leads to it feeling very underwhelming. To remedy this, I've uncapped the range on self-preservation and removed the scaling between tiers. Now, at all ranks, self-preservation would only last for 10 seconds, but this duration would increase based on how many times you've been hooked, giving it sort of a passive anti-tunneling effect. Our final killer perk is Unrelenting. Unrelenting actually feels pretty good to use in those rare moments where you do miss a basic attack. The issue is that you really shouldn't be missing to begin with, and if you are, that's not an issue that any perk is going to solve. On top of that, what makes no sense to me is that the perk has no effect when your attack collides with the environment. So the first thing that I would change would be that, on top of a small increase to the numbers, Unrelenting now works on both missed and collision blocked basic attacks. This makes the standard effect more universally useful for newer players, and it gives some more niche uses to killers like Dredge and Knight. And finally, I would add a minor secondary effect, which is boosting your lunge speed. This wouldn't increase your lunge range, but rather shorten the time it takes to get from point A to point B. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe, and also let me know which one of these perks is your favorite down below. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful night.